My name is Madison Hayes, and I'm 32 years old. Growing up as the younger sister to Stephanie, the family golden child, meant living in a constant shadow. Every year, like clockwork, my parents would forget my birthday while throwing elaborate celebrations for my sister. It was a pattern that defined my childhood, shaped my self-worth, and nearly broke me. But last year, something unexpected happened that changed everything. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story might resonate with you. Before I continue, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you want more stories about family healing and self-discovery. I grew up in a pristine colonial house in Westport, Connecticut, where appearances mattered more than feelings. My father, Thomas Hayes, was a finance executive with exacting standards. Everything in his life needed to be perfect: his lawn, his car, his family. My mother, Elaine, was equally invested in maintaining our social status, constantly hosting dinner parties and charity events. They weren't bad people, but they had very specific ideas about success and the right path in life. Then there was Stephanie. 3 years older than me, she was everything my parents valued: academically brilliant, conventionally beautiful, and athletically gifted. By the time she was 10, our living room shelves were already crowded with her debate trophies, swimming medals, and academic certificates. My parents beamed with pride at every achievement, never missing an opportunity to tell neighbors and friends about Stephanie's latest accomplishment. I was different. While Stephanie excelled in structured environments, I was more creative and free-spirited. I preferred sketching to solving math problems and writing stories to memorizing historical dates. My mind worked differently, something I now recognize as a creative strength, but back then, it just felt like I couldn't measure up. My first clear memory of feeling the birthday disparity was when I turned 5. I'd been excited for weeks, telling everyone at kindergarten about my upcoming celebration. The morning of my birthday, I bounced down the stairs expecting balloons or special breakfast pancakes, something to mark the day as special. Instead, I found my parents huddled at the kitchen table, going through catalog options for Stephanie's upcoming 8th birthday party. They were discussing pony rentals and professional entertainers, completely absorbed in planning an event still 3 weeks away. "Good morning," I said, standing in the doorway in my favorite pajamas. "It's my birthday today." My mother looked up, startled. "Oh, yes, of course. Happy birthday, sweetie." She glanced at my father, who checked his watch with a frown. "We'll pick up a cake on the way home from work," he said, already returning to the catalog. "Elaine, do you think we should get the deluxe package for Stephanie's party? The one with the professional photographer?" That evening, they brought home a small grocery store cake with generic "Happy Birthday" lettering. My name wasn't even on it. Meanwhile, on the counter sat elaborately designed invitation samples for Stephanie's party, which would ultimately feature a hired magician, custom decorations, and a professionally catered lunch for 15 of her friends. Aunt Rebecca, my mother's younger sister, was the only one who seemed to notice the pattern. She arrived that evening with a wrapped gift and a genuine smile. "There's my birthday girl," she exclaimed, scooping me into a warm hug that smelled like vanilla and safety. After dinner, while my parents returned to their party planning, Aunt Rebecca sat with me in the backyard swing. "You know," she said, watching me pick at my cake slice, "you're a very special person, Madison. You see the world in ways other people don't." "Not special like Stephanie," I replied. Aunt Rebecca tilted my chin up. "No, special like Madison. And that's better, because there's only one of you." I tried to believe her. Throughout elementary school, I worked hard to earn the kind of attention Stephanie received so effortlessly. I brought home good grades, though never perfect like hers. I joined the school choir, though I wasn't selected for solos like she had been. I tried soccer, but quit after a season of sitting on the bench. Nothing seemed to generate the same enthusiasm from my parents. By the time I was 9, I'd stopped reminding them about my upcoming birthday. It had become a day of disappointment rather than celebration, and somehow, preparing for it made the letdown worse. Each year, Aunt Rebecca remained my constant, always appearing with thoughtful gifts that showed she knew me: art supplies, books about strong women, Once even a camera that became my most treasured possession. Just because they don't see you properly doesn't mean you're not worth seeing, she would tell me, words I clung to during the lonely moments that increasingly defined my childhood. My 13th birthday coincided with a major milestone in our household, Stephanie's acceptance to Princeton, her dream school, and our father's alma mater. I came home from middle school to find our living room filled with relatives, neighbors, and family friends. For one heartbreaking moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone had remembered my birthday and planned a surprise. Then I saw the banner, "Congratulations, Stephanie. Princeton bound." I stood in the doorway, my backpack still on, watching as my sister was surrounded by adoring adults offering congratulations. My mother fluttered around, serving hors d'oeuvres on our best china. My father stood beside Stephanie, his hand proudly on her shoulder as he recounted her achievements to his golf buddies. My best friend Allison had come over to study, not knowing about the impromptu celebration. She noticed my expression and followed my gaze to the calendar hanging in the kitchen, where she could clearly see Madison's birthday written in small letters. "They forgot again," she whispered, squeezing my hand. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Let's go to my house," she offered. "My mom will make us brownies." But as we tried to slip out, my mother spotted us. "Madison, where are you going? Come congratulate your sister." So I did what was expected. I smiled, hugged Stephanie, and told her how proud I was. And I meant it. She had worked hard and deserved her success. What hurt wasn't her achievement, but the complete erasure of my existence on the one day that should have been mine. During dinner that night, as everyone continued celebrating Stephanie, I finally gathered my courage. "Today is my birthday," I said quietly during a rare moment of conversation lull. My announcement landed like a stone in still water. Brief ripples of discomfort, then nothing. "Oh." My mother looked genuinely surprised. "Of course it is. Happy birthday, sweetheart." My father glanced up from his plate. "We'll celebrate this weekend when things settle down. 13 isn't as significant as a college acceptance anyway." Stephanie, to her credit, looked mortified. "Mom, Dad, we should at least have cake or something." "We don't have cake," my mother interrupted. "But we can pick one up tomorrow. Madison understands that tonight is special for you." And that was it. My birthday acknowledgement lasted less than 30 seconds before conversation returned to Stephanie's scholarship package. That weekend celebration never materialized. When I mentioned it Sunday night, my father frowned. "Madison, don't be selfish. Your sister is facing a major life transition. There will be plenty of birthdays for you." I retreated further into my own world after that. I poured myself into art, spending hours in the school's studio working on photography projects and sketches. I built a small but solid group of friends who valued me for who I was. I started keeping a journal, documenting my thoughts and feelings since no one in my family seemed interested in hearing them. My sweet 16 brought fresh disappointment. 2 weeks before, I overheard my mother on the phone discussing party venues and catering options. Hope bloomed in my chest. Perhaps they were planning something special to make up for past oversights. "Yes, we'll need the space for about 50 people," she was saying. "It's to celebrate Stephanie being named valedictorian." The celebration was scheduled for the weekend after my actual birthday. Once again, my special day passed with only a hurried happy birthday from my parents as they rushed out to a meeting with the caterer. Aunt Rebecca showed up that evening and found me alone in my room. "Get dressed," she said. "We're going out." She took me to dinner at a small French restaurant in town, followed by a show at a local theater. She presented me with a delicate silver bracelet with a charm that resembled a camera. "To remind you to keep focusing on how you see the world," she said. "Your perspective is a gift, Madison, even if your parents don't recognize it yet." "Will they ever?" I asked, voicing the question that had been haunting me for years. Aunt Rebecca sighed. "Some people get so caught up in their own vision of what matters that they miss the beautiful things right in front of them. But that doesn't make those things any less beautiful." Her words helped, but they couldn't entirely heal the wound that was steadily deepening with each forgotten birthday, each overlooked achievement, each comparison to my perfect sister. When it came time for college applications, I deliberately applied to schools far from the East Coast. My parents pushed Princeton, of course, the Hayes family legacy, but I stood firm. I chose the University of Colorado in Boulder, with its strong visual arts program and, more importantly, its 1,500 miles of distance from Westport. A state school. My father couldn't hide his disappointment. With your grades, you could at least aim for something in the Ivy League. I'm not Stephanie, I replied, a statement that had become my mantra. This is the right school for me. My parents reluctantly accepted my decision, though my father made it clear he considered it a waste of potential and money. Stephanie, meanwhile, was thriving at Princeton, exactly where she was expected to be, doing exactly what she was expected to do. Boulder was transformative. For the first time in my life, I existed completely separate from Stephanie's shadow. No one compared me to my brilliant sister. No one had preconceived expectations about who I should be. I could simply be Madison. I declared a major in graphic design with a minor in photography. I discovered a passion for visual storytelling that eventually led to an internship with a local magazine. I made friends who knew nothing about Stephanie, Rachel, a literature major from Seattle with a contagious laugh, and Jordan, a fellow design student who challenged me to push my creative boundaries. You have a unique eye, my photography professor told me after reviewing my portfolio. There's an emotional honesty in your work that can't be taught. It was the first time an authority figure had recognized something special in me rather than comparing me to someone else. I felt myself beginning to heal, to grow into the person I was meant to be rather than the person I'd always failed to become in my family's eyes. Still, I returned home for major holidays and occasional weekends. Each visit reinforced the emotional distance growing between me and my parents. They asked polite questions about school, but showed little genuine interest in my studies or projects. Conversation inevitably returned to Stephanie's latest accomplishments or Connecticut gossip about people I barely remembered. The pattern of forgotten birthdays continued. My 21st birthday, a milestone by anyone's standards, coincided with Stephanie's engagement to her college sweetheart, Bradley, a third-generation Princeton graduate with a promising future in corporate law. The timing couldn't have been worse. We're hosting an engagement party, my mother announced during our spring break phone call. The Whitneys will be flying in from California, and Bradley's family wants to meet everyone. We need you home that weekend. That's my 21st birthday, I said, already knowing it wouldn't matter. Is it? Well, you can celebrate with all of us then. It'll be lovely. The engagement party was held at the country club, an elegant affair with champagne fountains and ice sculptures. I was assigned to take photos. You're so good with that camera of yours, Madison, which meant I spent the evening as an observer rather than a participant. Not a single person acknowledged my birthday. Not even Stephanie, who was understandably caught up in her own moment. As I circulated with my camera, capturing other people's joy, I felt more invisible than ever. Later that night, after most guests had departed, Aunt Rebecca found me sitting alone on the country club terrace. 21, she said, clinking her glass against mine. A proper adult now. Not according to anyone in there, I replied, nodding toward the reception hall where my parents were still mingling with Bradley's family. Have you ever tried talking to them about how this makes you feel? She asked gently. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. What would I say? Excuse me, could you please care about me as much as you care about Stephanie? They'd just think I'm jealous and immature. Or they might realize they've been hurting you without meaning to, Aunt Rebecca suggested. Sometimes people don't see the patterns in their own behavior until someone points them out. Encouraged by her words, and perhaps by the champagne, I approached my parents the next morning as they reviewed photographs from the party. I need to talk to you both, I began, my heart pounding. Yesterday was my 21st birthday, and no one acknowledged it. Not even once. And it's not just yesterday, it's every year. You forget or minimize my birthday while planning elaborate celebrations for Stephanie. My mother looked genuinely confused. That's not true, Madison. We've celebrated your birthdays. Name one celebration from the past 5 years, I challenged. Well, there was. She trailed off, looking to my father for help. This is ridiculous, he said, setting down his coffee cup with too much force. You're an adult now, Madison, not a child who needs a party hat and balloons. Birthdays become less important as you get older. Except Stephanie's, I said quietly. Those still merit catering and country club venues. Stephanie's engagement is a significant life event, my mother replied, her voice taking on the patient tone she used when she thought someone was being unreasonable. It's not about the birthday. It's about what the occasion represents. And what message do you think it sends when you consistently forget or downplay my special days? I asked. What does that represent? It represents you being dramatic and jealous of your sister's happiness, my father said dismissively. I thought you'd outgrown this competition with Stephanie. And there it was, the invalidation I'd expected. Any objection to their behavior was framed as a character flaw on my part. I was being selfish, jealous, immature. The problem wasn't their neglect, but my reaction to it. I returned to Boulder the next day instead of staying the planned week. When Aunt Rebecca called to check on me, I told her about the conversation. Maybe it's time to create some stronger boundaries, she suggested. Love your family, but don't depend on them for validation. You've built a good life in Colorado. Focus on the people who see your worth. It was sound advice, and I tried to follow it. I started declining some holiday invitations, citing work commitments or travel plans with friends. I called home less frequently. I built a life that didn't revolve around seeking approval I was unlikely to ever receive. After graduation, I moved to New York City, accepting a position at a small but innovative design firm called Prism Creative. The salary wasn't impressive, but the opportunity to build a diverse portfolio was invaluable. I found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that I could almost afford and supplemented my income with freelance photography jobs on weekends. New York was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. The pace, the crowds, the constant hum of activity, all of it was a world away from both Westport's manicured predictability and Boulder's relaxed charm. For the first few months, I questioned my decision almost daily, especially when facing another meal of ramen noodles or dealing with yet another subway delay. But gradually, I found my rhythm. Prism's creative director, Catherine Chin, became a mentor who pushed me to refine my skills while encouraging my unique perspective. You have a rare ability to find emotional truth in visual storytelling, she told me during my 6-month review. That can't be taught, Madison. It comes from lived experience. I wondered what she would think if she knew my lived experience included feeling like a ghost in my own family. My career progressed steadily, if not spectacularly. I wasn't making headlines or winning prestigious awards like Stephanie, who had completed her law degree and joined a top Manhattan firm, but I was building a reputation for thoughtful, impactful design work. I found purpose in projects for nonprofits and social causes, creating visual campaigns that helped important messages reach wider audiences. I maintained contact with my family through occasional visits and regular phone calls. These interactions followed a familiar pattern: polite inquiries about my work, with little understanding of what I actually did, updates on Connecticut acquaintances I barely remembered, and detailed reports on Stephanie's latest achievements. My 20th birthday coincided with Stephanie's promotion to junior partner at her law firm, the youngest in the firm's history, my mother emphasized repeatedly. Once again, a family celebration was planned. Once again, my birthday was an afterthought. We'd love for you to come home that weekend, my mother said during our monthly call. Your father is inviting some of his colleagues, and it would be nice to have both daughters present. It's my birthday that weekend, I reminded her, a hollowness expanding in my chest as I realized we were replaying the same script yet again. Oh, well, we can acknowledge that too, of course. We'll get a cake. I declined the invitation, citing a work deadline that didn't actually exist. Instead, I spent my birthday weekend with friends who had planned a surprise party at my favorite restaurant, complete with thoughtful gifts that showed how well they knew me. As I looked around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who celebrated me simply for being me, I felt both profound gratitude and lingering sadness. The pattern had followed me into adulthood. Perhaps it always would. Around this time, I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Fisher, initially to address anxiety related to a particularly demanding work project. Our sessions quickly expanded to explore the family dynamics that had shaped my self-perception. What you're describing is a form of emotional neglect, She explained after I recounted the birthday pattern. It's particularly damaging because it's not about what happened, but about what didn't happen, the recognition and celebration you deserved but didn't receive. But my parents provided everything I needed, I argued. We weren't poor. I had opportunities many people don't have. Emotional needs are as real as physical ones, Dr. Fisher replied. Children need to feel seen and valued for who they are, not just for what they achieve or how they compare to siblings. Over months of therapy, I began to understand how deeply these childhood experiences had affected me. My people-pleasing tendencies, my difficulty accepting compliments, my fear of asking for what I needed, all were rooted in early lessons that my needs and feelings were secondary, unimportant, or burdensome to others. The good news, Dr. Fisher told me, is that recognizing these patterns is the first step toward changing them. You can build healthier relationships and expectations moving forward. I took her words to heart, working to establish clearer boundaries with my family while nurturing friendships with people who appreciated me as I was. I focused on my career, eventually earning a promotion to senior designer at Prism. I began dating Michael, a children's book illustrator I met through mutual friends, whose kindness and emotional intelligence created space for real intimacy. It was Michael who first noticed my withdrawal when family events approached. "You get quieter," he observed after I ended a call with my mother about Thanksgiving plans. "Like you're bracing yourself for something." When I explained the family dynamics, including the birthday pattern, his response was refreshingly validating. "That's really messed up," he said simply. "No wonder you have mixed feelings about going home." They're not bad people. I found myself defending them, a reflex I developed over years. They just have blind spots. Blind spots that happen to correspond exactly to your needs and accomplishments, Michael noted. Maybe at some point, it's okay to call it what it is, a hurtful pattern that's affected you deeply. His perspective was both comforting and unsettling. For so long, I'd minimized my own feelings, convinced that my pain was an overreaction. Hearing someone else recognize the legitimacy of my experience was powerful and frightening. If my feelings were valid, then so was the hurt that had accumulated over decades of emotional neglect. My 30th birthday should have been a day of celebration and reflection. I'd recently been promoted to Associate Creative Director at Prism, a position that brought new responsibilities and creative freedom. Michael and I had moved in together, creating a cozy home in a slightly larger Brooklyn apartment. I had good friends, fulfilling work, and a relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. I'd planned a celebration with friends for the Saturday after my birthday, a dinner at my favorite restaurant followed by dancing at a nearby club. It wasn't elaborate, but it was exactly what I wanted. Good food, good music, and people who genuinely cared about me. Then, 3 days before my birthday, my mother called. "Madison, we need you to come home this weekend," she said, her voice carrying the mixture of authority and entreaty that had always been difficult to refuse. "It's extremely important." "I have plans," I replied, already feeling the familiar tug of guilt. "It's my birthday weekend." "This is a significant family gathering," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Everyone will be there. Aunt Rebecca, your cousins, even Grandfather William is coming from Florida." My resistance wavered. Grandfather rarely traveled due to his health. If he was making the journey from Florida, something major must be happening. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, suddenly worried. "Is this a health issue?" "Everyone's fine," she assured me quickly. "But this is very important to the family, Madison. We need you here." After ending the call, I sat staring at my phone, that familiar conflict churning inside me. Michael found me there, still holding my phone 20 minutes later. "Everything okay?" he asked, settling beside me on the couch. I explained my mother's call and the choice I was facing. "What do you think is happening?" he asked. "Any special anniversaries or announcements?" I shook my head, then paused. "Stephanie and Bradley have been trying to start a family. Maybe that's it? On your birthday weekend?" Michael's skepticism was clear. "That seems like exactly what would happen," I finished for him, the realization settling heavily. "But I should go. Grandfather's going to be there, and I rarely get to see him." "Want me to come with you?" Michael offered. "I can reschedule my client meeting." I considered it but declined. Having him there would change the family dynamic, and I wanted to understand what was happening without that additional complication. I called my friends to cancel our plans, apologizing profusely and promising a rain-check celebration. Then I booked a train ticket to Connecticut. When I arrived home that Saturday morning, my suspicions were immediately confirmed. The house was decorated with balloons and flowers. A catering van was parked in the driveway. Through the window, I could see staff setting up serving tables in our backyard. For one brief, irrational moment, I wondered if I'd been wrong all these years. Could this actually be for me? Had my family finally remembered my birthday and planned a surprise celebration? The thought lasted exactly as long as it took my mother to open the front door. Madison. Perfect timing. The guests start arriving in 2 hours, and we could use help arranging the gift table. I set down my overnight bag. What's the occasion, Mom? Her eyes lit up with genuine excitement. Stephanie's pregnant. They confirmed it last week, but we wanted to wait until everyone could be here for the announcement. Your father is absolutely beside himself, the first grandchild. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. Of course. Of course this was happening on my birthday weekend. Of course my plans were disrupted for Stephanie's celebration. The pattern was nothing if not consistent. That's wonderful news, I managed, and part of me meant it. Stephanie would be a good mother, and a baby was certainly cause for joy. Where is she? Upstairs resting. Morning sickness, poor thing. Bradley's picking up grandfather from the train station. My mother glanced at her watch. The gift table needs arranging, and then could you help set out the appetizer plates? The caterers are running behind. And, just like that, I was assigned the role of helper rather than guest, an extension of the household staff rather than a family member celebrating a milestone birthday. I nodded mechanically and went to work on the gift table, arranging baby-themed presents with numb fingers. The party was in full swing by 2 o'clock. Relatives, family friends, and colleagues filled our home and spilled into the backyard, where a tent had been erected complete with heaters against the October chill. There was a champagne fountain with sparkling cider for Stephanie, a multi-tiered cake decorated with storks and baby blocks, and a professional photographer documenting everything. I circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres, accepted congratulations meant for my sister, and took photos when asked. Aunt Rebecca found me in the kitchen, refilling a platter of deviled eggs. "Happy birthday, Madison," she said quietly, pressing a small wrapped package into my hands. "You remembered," I said, my throat suddenly tight. "I've never forgotten." She squeezed my arm. "Are you okay?" Before I could answer, my father appeared in the doorway. "There you are, Madison. We need more ice for the bar, and your mother's looking for the special champagne flutes for the toast." Aunt Rebecca raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as I tucked her gift into my pocket and reached for the ice bucket. The breaking point came during the toast. Everyone gathered in the living room as my father raised his glass to Stephanie and Bradley, his voice thick with emotion. "Today marks the beginning of the next generation of our family," he proclaimed. "There's no greater joy than knowing the Hayes name will continue through this child." As applause erupted around me, a woman I recognized as my mother's friend from her garden club leaned toward me. "Such a lovely coincidence," she said cheerfully. "A new life announced on your birthday. What a special shared celebration." Heads turned in our direction. Conversation stilled. I saw my mother's expression freeze, my father's brow furrow in confusion. "It's your birthday?" Stephanie asked from her place of honor near the fireplace, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Today?" And something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching for 30 years, finally broke. "Yes," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. "It's my 30th birthday today. But don't worry about not knowing that. No one in this family has ever really acknowledged my birthday. Why start now when there's something more important to celebrate?" Shock rippled through the room. My mother took a step toward me, her face a mask of horrified embarrassment. "Madison, this isn't the time." "It's never the time," I interrupted, years of suppressed hurt rushing out like water through a broken dam. "My 5th birthday wasn't the time because you were planning Stephanie's party. My 13th wasn't the time because of her Princeton acceptance. My 21st wasn't the time because of her engagement. And now my 30th isn't the time because she's pregnant." There's always a reason why Stephanie's moments matter more than mine. That's not fair, my father interjected, his face flushing with anger. This isn't about you, Madison. This is about the family's first grandchild. It's never about me, Dad. That's exactly my point. I looked around at the shocked faces of our relatives and friends. Do you know what I did for my 21st birthday? I took photos at Stephanie's engagement party. Did anyone in this room even notice it was my birthday that day? Did anyone care? Stephanie's eyes were wide with distress. Madison, I didn't know. Of course you knew, I said, though without anger toward her specifically. You just didn't think it mattered. None of you did. You never have. My mother stepped forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. This is completely inappropriate. Birthdays aren't important at your age. You're making a scene over nothing. And there it was, the final confirmation that my feelings, my experiences, my very existence was nothing in her eyes. I'm making a scene over 30 years of being treated like I don't matter, I corrected her, already reaching for my purse. But don't worry, I won't ruin Stephanie's special day any further. Congratulations on the baby. I'm sure you'll be wonderful grandparents, just like you've been wonderful parents to one of your children. I left amid a chorus of shocked whispers and my mother's calls to come back immediately. The drive back to the train station was a blur, tears obscuring my vision until I had to pull over and collect myself. I changed my ticket and was back in New York by evening, climbing the stairs to our apartment with leaden feet. Michael took one look at my face and opened his arms without a word. I collapsed against his chest, finally allowing the sobs that had been building all day to break free. They didn't even know, I choked out between tears. 30 years, and they didn't even know it was my birthday. Michael held me, stroked my hair, and let me cry until I had no tears left. Then he made tea, sat beside me on our worn couch, and listened as I recounted the events of the day. I lost it, I concluded, exhaustion settling into my bones. I ruined Stephanie's pregnancy announcement with my emotional meltdown. I'm exactly what my father always thought, selfish and immature. No, Michael said firmly. You're someone who finally stood up for herself after a lifetime of being dismissed. That's not selfish, Madison. That's self-respect. His words were a lifeline in that moment, an affirmation that my feelings were valid, my hurt was real, and my outburst was understandable if not perfectly timed. What do I do now? I asked, staring into my cooling tea. Whatever feels right to you, he replied. Take some time. Set some boundaries. Decide what kind of relationship you want with your family moving forward, if any. That night, as messages and calls from family members accumulated on my phone, I made the decision to take a step back. I needed space to process 30 years of emotional neglect without the pressure of immediate reconciliation. I needed time to determine what I wanted from these relationships going forward, rather than automatically accepting whatever scraps of attention were occasionally thrown my way. I texted Aunt Rebecca to let her know I was safe, then silenced my phone and tried to sleep. In the days following what Michael dubbed the birthday confrontation, my phone became a repository of family reactions. My mother left voicemails that oscillated between indignation, "I can't believe you would embarrass us like that," and minimization, "You're making mountains out of molehills, as usual." My father's single message was predictably brief, "Call when you're ready to discuss this rationally." Stephanie's text was different. I never realized how hurtful our family's birthday pattern was. I should have noticed and said something years ago. I'm truly sorry, Madison. When you're ready to talk, I'm here. It was perhaps the first time my sister had acknowledged the dynamic that had defined our relationship since childhood. The recognition was both validating and frustrating. Why had it taken a public confrontation for anyone to see what had been happening all along? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I doubled down on therapy with Dr. Fisher, scheduling weekly sessions rather than our usual bi-weekly meetings. Together, we unpacked not just the birthday pattern, but the entirety of my family experience, the constant comparisons, the dismissal of my needs, the subtle and not-so-subtle messages that I was somehow less worthy of attention and celebration. What you did was set a boundary, Dr. Fisher told me during one particularly intense session. It wasn't perfectly executed, and the timing wasn't ideal, but it was necessary. You've spent your life accommodating their neglect at the expense of your own emotional health. But I hurt them, I said, still wrestling with guilt despite my justified anger. Especially Stephanie. Her pregnancy announcement should have been a happy moment. Yes, your timing could have been better, Dr. Fisher acknowledged. But consider this. Would they be equally concerned about having hurt you repeatedly throughout your life? Or is the expectation that only your feelings should be sacrificed for family harmony? It was a powerful reframing. For 3 decades, I'd been expected to smile through the pain of being overlooked and undervalued. The one time I'd refused to do so was being treated as an unforgivable transgression, while years of emotional neglect were considered simply the way things were. Work became a refuge during this period. At Prism, I immersed myself in a major campaign for a women's health nonprofit, creating visuals that told stories of resilience and self-advocacy. Catherine noticed both my increased focus and the emotional depth in my designs. "Whatever's happening in your personal life," she said after reviewing my preliminary concepts, "it's translating into some of your strongest work yet. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself along the way." I was taking care of myself, perhaps for the first time. I established firm boundaries around communication with my family, responding to texts and calls only when I felt emotionally equipped to do so. I prioritized activities that nourished my spirit, photography excursions to different neighborhoods, cooking experiments with Michael, weekend hikes outside the city. I started a journal specifically focused on positive affirmations and evidence of my own worth, a practice Dr. Fisher suggested to counter years of internalized messages about my secondary status. My relationship with Michael deepened during this period of healing. His unwavering support and willingness to hold space for my complex emotions created a safe haven in which I could process decades of hurt without judgment. "I'm not sure I would be handling this as well as you are," he confessed one evening as we walked along the Brooklyn promenade. "The courage it takes to confront these patterns and choose a different path, it's remarkable, Madison." "It doesn't feel like courage," I admitted. "Most days it feels like survival." "That's often what courage looks like," he replied. "Doing the hard thing because not doing it would be worse." Aunt Rebecca remained a constant support, calling weekly with updates that carefully avoided pressuring me toward reconciliation. She confirmed what I'd suspected: my confrontation had created significant ripples in the family system. "Your mother is alternating between defensiveness and genuine confusion," she reported. "She truly doesn't see the pattern you described, which is telling in itself. Your father is more reserved, but I think he's doing some reflection. And Stephanie, she's the most affected, Madison. She's been going through old family videos and photos, seeing things she never noticed before." I appreciated the information but wasn't ready to re-engage. Instead, I focused on building a life rich with people who valued me for exactly who I was. I cultivated deeper friendships with colleagues whose company I enjoyed. I reconnected with old friends from college. I created a chosen family of people who showed up not out of obligation but out of genuine care and interest. My 31st birthday became a test case for this new approach to life. Instead of hoping for acknowledgement from my family or downplaying the day's significance, I decided to celebrate exactly as I wanted. Michael coordinated with friends to throw a surprise party at our favorite rooftop bar, complete with thoughtful gifts and heartfelt toasts that made me feel truly seen and appreciated. As I looked around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, I felt a curious mixture of joy and lingering sadness. The celebration was perfect, exactly what I had always wanted my birthdays to be. Yet there remained a small, wounded part of me that still wished for what I had never received from my parents: the simple acknowledgement that the day of my birth was worth celebrating, that my existence was cause for joy rather than an afterthought. "It's okay to feel both grateful for what you have and sad about what you missed," Dr. Fisher assured me when I shared these conflicting emotions. "Healing isn't linear, and it doesn't mean you stop wishing things had been different." Over the following months, I began responding to some family communications, establishing careful boundaries along the way. Short texts to my mother about neutral topics. Brief calls with my father that avoided deeper issues. More substantive exchanges with Stephanie, who seemed genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship on more equal terms. I wasn't ready for in-person visits or holiday gatherings, choosing instead to spend Thanksgiving with Michael's family and Christmas on a trip to Seattle to visit Rachel. These choices weren't about punishment, but protection. Creating space for my continued healing without re-entering environments that had caused so much pain. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation, Dr. Fisher reminded me. You can forgive your family for their limitations without subjecting yourself to the same patterns of behavior. I was learning to hold these complex truths simultaneously, that my parents had done the best they could with their own limited emotional tools, that their best had still caused significant harm, that I could acknowledge both these realities while prioritizing my own well-being going forward. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't finished, but it was progress. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was placing my own needs and feelings at the center of my decisions rather than contorting myself to fit others' expectations. I was learning that self-advocacy wasn't selfishness, that healthy boundaries weren't rejection, and that my worth wasn't dependent on others' recognition of it. I was, at last, beginning to truly see myself. 1 week before my 32nd birthday, an email from Stephanie appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Can we talk? In person?" I stared at the message for a long time before opening it. Our communication over the past year had been cautiously rebuilding, text messages, occasional phone calls, even a video chat when my nephew was born. But we hadn't seen each other face to face since my confrontation at her pregnancy announcement. The email was brief and direct. "Madison, I know your birthday is coming up, and that date carries a lot of history for us. I've been doing a lot of thinking and would like to talk to you in person if you're willing. I'll come to New York, wherever you feel comfortable meeting. This isn't about pressuring you to reconcile with Mom and Dad. It's about you and me. Please consider it. Love, Steph." I forwarded the email to Dr. Fisher, seeking her perspective before responding. "What do you want to do?" she asked during our next session. "Setting aside obligations or expectations, what feels right to you?" I considered the question carefully. Part of me is curious, I admitted. Stephanie's been more reflective than our parents about the family dynamics. But I'm also afraid of being pulled back into old patterns or having my experience minimized again. Those are valid concerns, Dr. Fisher acknowledged. If you do decide to meet, what boundaries would help you feel safe? We discussed options, meeting in a public place rather than my apartment, keeping the visit time limited, having a plan for how to exit the conversation if it became uncomfortable. With these guardrails in place, I felt equipped to respond to Stephanie's request. I suggested a coffee shop in Brooklyn, neutral territory where we could talk without the pressure of either of our homes. She agreed immediately, and 3 days before my birthday, I found myself sitting at a corner table, watching the door with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Stephanie entered looking both familiar and changed. Motherhood had softened her in some ways, added new lines of fatigue and joy around her eyes. She spotted me and smiled tentatively, approaching with uncharacteristic hesitation. Our greeting was awkward, a moment of uncertainty between a hug and a handshake that resolved into a brief, stiff embrace. We ordered drinks and settled into uncomfortable small talk about her son, my work, the unseasonably warm weather. Finally, Stephanie took a deep breath. "I found something a few months ago," she began, reaching into her bag. "Mom asked me to digitize some old family videos for a project she's working on for Dad's retirement. I've been going through all these home movies and photographs from when we were kids." She placed a thumb drive on the table between us. "Madison, I saw things I never noticed when we were living through them. Or maybe I noticed, but didn't understand what I was seeing." She pushed the drive toward me. "I made a compilation. You don't have to watch it now, but I'd like you to see it." "What is it?" I asked, not touching the drive. "Evidence," she said simply. "Of everything you talked about at my pregnancy party. The pattern was so obvious once I was looking for it, Madison. Birthday after birthday where you're barely visible in the background while I'm centered in every frame. Holiday gatherings where you're taking the photos instead of being in them. Your high school graduation, where Dad spent most of the ceremony on the phone with my college advisor." I felt my chest tighten, tears threatening despite my determination to remain composed. "Why did you want to show me this?" I managed to ask. Because I owe you an apology, Stephanie said, her own eyes glistening. Not just for not seeing it then, but for my part in it. I accepted the spotlight without ever questioning why it was always on me. I took all that attention as my due without noticing what it was costing you. She reached across the table, but stopped short of touching my hand, respecting the emotional distance I'd established. After you left that day, things were chaotic. Mom was mortified, Dad was angry, the guests didn't know where to look. But later, when everyone was gone, I couldn't stop thinking about what you'd said. It was like something clicked into place, this pattern that had always been there, but I'd never fully acknowledged. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I confronted Mom and Dad about it. It didn't go well initially. Mom insisted they'd always treated us equally, and Dad said you were being overdramatic. But I kept pushing. I showed them some of the videos I'd found, pointed out the discrepancy in how our achievements were celebrated, how your birthdays were consistently overshadowed by my events. I was stunned. In all our childhood years, Stephanie had never challenged our parents' preferential treatment. She had accepted her golden child status as the natural order of things. Did they listen? I asked, barely above a whisper. Not at first, she admitted. There was a lot of defensiveness, a lot of "that's not how we remember it." But I think the videos were hard to argue with. Mom eventually admitted she hadn't realized how consistent the pattern was. Dad's having a harder time acknowledging it, but he's at least stopped dismissing your feelings outright. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a small wrapped package. This is for your birthday. It's not much, but I wanted you to have it before the actual day for once. I accepted the gift with trembling hands, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a handmade scrapbook. Opening it, I found photographs I'd never seen before. Moments from our childhood captured from angles that suggested someone other than our parents had been holding the camera. Aunt Rebecca, perhaps, or family friends. There were pictures of me painting at an easel, laughing with friends at what appeared to be a school event, receiving an award I barely remembered. Interspersed were notes in Stephanie's handwriting, memories of moments we'd shared, observations about my kindness or creativity or resilience that I'd never known she'd noticed. I realized there were all these pieces of your story that never made it into our family narrative, Stephanie explained as I turned the pages. All these achievements and beautiful qualities that got overlooked in the focus on my more conventional successes. I closed the book, overcome. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she assured me. I didn't do this expecting immediate forgiveness or for everything to be fixed. I just wanted you to know that I see you now, Madison. I see what happened, and I'm truly sorry for my part in it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 decades of family dynamics hovering between us. There's something else, Stephanie said finally. I'd like to have dinner with you on your birthday. Just us, no parents, no Bradley, no baby. Just sisters reconnecting on a day that should have been celebrated all along. My instinct was to refuse, to protect myself from yet another birthday disappointment. But looking at my sister's face, open, vulnerable, sincerely remorseful, I recognized the courage it had taken for her to confront both our parents and her own role in my pain. I'd like that, I said cautiously. But just us. Actually, she hesitated. Aunt Rebecca would love to join if that's okay with you. She's been your champion all along, and she'd never forgive me if I didn't at least ask. I smiled at the mention of the one family member who had consistently seen and valued me. Aunt Rebecca is always welcome. As we parted outside the coffee shop, Stephanie hugged me again, a real embrace this time, not the awkward gesture from earlier. I can't change the past, she whispered against my hair, but I hope we can build something better going forward. You deserved so much more than you got, Madison. I'm sorry it took me so long to say that. I walked home in a daze, the scrapbook clutched to my chest, my emotions a tangled knot of surprise, cautious hope, and lingering hurt. I showed the book to Michael that evening, watching his face as he turned the pages and recognized the significance of what Stephanie had done. This is huge, he said, looking up at me. Are you okay? I think so, I replied, surprised to find it was true. It doesn't erase what happened, but it matters that she sees it now. That she's acknowledging it. Are you going to go to the dinner? I nodded. with boundaries in place. But yes, I think I need to see where this goes. For the first time in years, I felt a flutter of anticipation rather than dread at the prospect of a birthday involving my family, even this small subset of it. Perhaps, after all this time, something was finally changing. My 32nd birthday dawned clear and crisp, a perfect October day in New York. Michael had taken the day off work to spend with me, and we enjoyed a leisurely morning followed by lunch at my favorite Italian restaurant. He presented me with a vintage camera he'd been secretly restoring for months, along with a planned photography trip to Maine in the spring. "Today is about celebrating you," he said, kissing me across our tiny kitchen table. "All of you exactly as you are." As evening approached, I prepared for dinner with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Stephanie had made reservations at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan, insisting she wanted this birthday to be done right. I chose my outfit carefully, a deep blue dress that made me feel confident, earrings that had been a gift from Aunt Rebecca years ago. "You look beautiful," Michael said as I prepared to leave. "Call if you need me, okay? For anything." I promised I would and headed to the restaurant, my stomach fluttering with nervous energy. I arrived exactly on time to find Stephanie already seated at a corner table, Aunt Rebecca beside her. They both stood when they saw me, their smiles genuine and warm. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Aunt Rebecca said, embracing me tightly. 32 years of making this world brighter just by being in it. Stephanie hugged me next, slightly awkward but sincere. "Happy birthday, sis." The table was decorated with tasteful birthday touches, a small arrangement of my favorite flowers, a card propped against my water glass, even a discreetly wrapped gift beside my place setting. It was everything a birthday acknowledgement should be: thoughtful, personalized, focused on celebrating the person being honored. Conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected. We avoided difficult family topics at first, focusing instead on Aunt Rebecca's recent retirement adventures, my current work projects, and Stephanie's adjustment to motherhood. As we finished our main courses, Stephanie signaled to the waiter, who brought over a small cake with a single candle. "Make a wish," Aunt Rebecca encouraged as the flame flickered between us. I closed my eyes, momentarily transported to all the childhood birthdays when no cake had appeared, when no one had sung or encouraged wishes. Then I opened them, smiled at these two women who were trying in their different ways to make amends, and blew out the candle. As the waiter served the cake, I noticed movement at the restaurant entrance. My heart stuttered as I recognized my parents, standing uncertainly by the host station, scanning the room. Stephanie followed my gaze and had the grace to look apologetic. "I didn't invite them," she said quickly. "I promise. I mentioned our dinner, but this is their doing." Aunt Rebecca squeezed my hand under the table. "You can ask them to leave," she said quietly. "This is your night. Your boundaries are valid." I considered it for a moment, watching as the host directed them toward our table. My father looked uncomfortable in the way he always did in emotional situations. My mother's expression was a complex mixture of determination and uncertainty. "It's okay," I decided, surprising myself. "Let's see what they have to say." They approached cautiously, my father nodding awkwardly in greeting, my mother clutching her purse like a shield. "Madison," my father began stiffly, "we don't want to intrude on your celebration. We just—" He glanced at my mother, clearly out of his emotional depth. "We wanted to wish you a happy birthday," my mother finished for him. "In person. May we join you for a moment?" I nodded, and they settled into the two empty chairs at our table. An uncomfortable silence descended, broken only when the waiter arrived to take their drink orders. After another painful pause, my father cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, Madison," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I've been reflecting on what you said at Stephanie's party, and what your sister has been pointing out since then. I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. But the pattern you described, it was real. And I'm sorry." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. In 32 years, I had never heard my father apologize for anything, let alone acknowledge a mistake of this magnitude. "Your father and I have been talking," my mother added, her voice less certain than usual. "Looking back at family events, birthdays, holidays. We didn't realize how it appeared from your perspective. How it felt to you. It wasn't about appearance, Mom, I said quietly. It was about being consistently overlooked and undervalued. About having my special days forgotten or minimized while Stephanie's were celebrated elaborately. My mother's lips thinned slightly, her instinct to defend clearly battling with her stated purpose of reconciliation. I understand that's how you experienced it, she said carefully. We didn't intend to make you feel less important. Your father and I were raised in families where achievements were what mattered, where children were expected to earn attention rather than receive it automatically. Stephanie's accomplishments were more conventional, more aligned with what we understood as success. And that justified forgetting my birthdays? Scheduling family events that overshadowed my milestones? No, my father interrupted before my mother could respond. No, it didn't justify it. We got it wrong, Madison. We were so focused on a certain definition of success that we missed what was special about you. Your creativity, your resilience, your unique way of seeing the world. I felt tears threatening and fought to maintain my composure. It hurt, I said simply. Year after year, it really hurt. I know, he acknowledged, something like real regret crossing his usually stoic features. I'm sorry we caused that hurt. I'm sorry I dismissed your feelings when you tried to tell us. My mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. We'd like to try to do better, she said. If you're willing to give us that chance. I looked around the table, at Aunt Rebecca, whose consistent love had been my anchor, at Stephanie, who had found the courage to challenge the family system, at my parents, awkward and imperfect in their attempt at amends. The wounds of 3 decades couldn't be healed in a single dinner, but perhaps this was a beginning. I'd like that, I said finally. But things need to be different. I need you to respect my boundaries, to listen when I tell you something is important to me, to acknowledge that my feelings and experiences are as valid as anyone else's in this family. That's fair, my father nodded. We could try family therapy, Stephanie suggested. All of us together. A neutral person to help us navigate this new territory. To my surprise, my parents agreed, though my father looked distinctly uncomfortable at the prospect. We spent the remainder of the evening in careful conversation, taking the first tentative steps toward a new kind of family relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than predetermined roles and expectations. When we parted, my mother hugged me with uncharacteristic emotion. Happy birthday, Madison, she whispered. I'm glad you were born. Simple words, but ones I had waited 32 years to hear. The months that followed were not without challenges. Family therapy sessions were often tense, with my mother's defensiveness and my father's discomfort with emotional discussions creating frequent roadblocks. Old patterns reasserted themselves in subtle ways, requiring vigilance and direct communication to address. But there was progress too. My parents made genuine efforts to understand my perspective, to acknowledge the impact of their past behavior, to create space for me as an equal member of the family rather than an afterthought. Stephanie and I rebuilt our relationship on new ground, discovering the adult friendship that had been obscured by our assigned family roles. By the time my 33rd birthday arrived, the changes were evident. My parents hosted a dinner at their home, not an elaborate affair, but a thoughtful gathering that centered on celebrating me. My mother had found photographs from my childhood that had rarely made it into family albums, displaying them alongside more recent images of my design work and travels with Michael. My birthday cake featured a camera design, a nod to my passion for photography. The gifts were chosen with clear consideration of my interests and preferences rather than what my parents thought I should want. Most importantly, the conversation focused on my life and experiences, with genuine interest rather than obligation. It wasn't perfect. My mother still occasionally slipped into comparing Stephanie's conventional life choices with my more creative path. My father sometimes struggled to engage with the emotional aspects of our newfound relationship. But they were trying, and that effort mattered more than perfection. As we gathered around the dining table that evening, I looked at the faces of my family, the people who had caused me such pain and were now working, imperfectly but sincerely, to heal those wounds. I thought about the journey that had brought us to this point, The years of silent suffering, the moment of explosive truth, the careful rebuilding that followed. I thought about Dr. Fisher's words from one of our recent sessions. Healing doesn't mean the damage never existed. It means the damage no longer controls your life. The damage had been real. The years of feeling invisible, unimportant, secondary in my own family had left scars that would never completely fade. But those scars no longer defined me or dictated my choices. I had built a life filled with people who saw and valued me, Michael, my friends, colleagues who respected my talents and perspective. And now, remarkably, my family was learning to see me too. As I blew out the candles on my 33rd birthday cake, I made a wish not for myself, but for continued healing for all of us. For the strength to forgive without forgetting, to remember the past without being imprisoned by it, to build new relationships that honored rather than erased our history. My journey from invisibility to self-worth hadn't ended with dramatic confrontation or perfect resolution. It continued each day in small choices, careful conversations, boundaries maintained and adjusted as needed. It lived in the growing recognition that my value had never depended on anyone else's acknowledgement of it, that I had always been worthy of celebration, even when that celebration didn't come. What are you thinking about? Stephanie asked, noticing my momentary introspection. I smiled at my sister, at my parents, at Aunt Rebecca, who had been my champion all along. I'm thinking about how far we've come, I said honestly. And how far we still have to go. Together, my father added, raising his glass. To Madison, not just today, but every day. As glasses clinked around me, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past couldn't be changed, but the future remained unwritten. And for perhaps the first time, I was truly excited to see what that future might hold. What about you? Have you ever had to confront painful family patterns to find healing? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your worth. Remember, your experiences matter, and your voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for sharing this journey with me today.